You know, if you sit at this end of the bar long enough, just watching the ice melt in your glass, you hear every variation of the same tired story.
Oh, absolutely. Every night.
Right. People walk in, slam their briefcases down, and they vent about their toxic boss.
Always a middle manager.
Yeah, exactly. Some
Yeah.
guy taking credit for a slide deck or a CEO throwing a tantrum over, quarterly projections. But consider this scenario for a second.
Right, hit me.
What if the guy signing your paychecks was so utterly unhinged, like so drunk on his own authority, that he didn't just fire you for making eye contact?
Which happens.
Right, which happens.
Yeah.
But what if he physically confiscated your spouse, moved her into his own penthouse office, and then banished you to a frozen wasteland to do manual labor until your heart gave out?
I mean, that sounds like the plot of some dystopian thriller. Or, a hyper-viral social media thread about a Silicon Valley scandal.
It totally does. It has that distinctly modern, megalomaniacal tech bro flavor. Right?
Oh, yeah. A spectacular abuse of power just waiting for a 10-part true crime documentary.
Exactly. But we aren't talking about modern venture capital today.
No, we're
No. We are doing a deep dive into an ancient Chinese text called the Sushin Ji.
Also known as In Search of the Supernatural.
That's the one. And we're looking at the story of a grassroots employee named Han Peng, his wife, Mrs. He, and their absolute nightmare of an employer, King Kang of Song.
A classic HR nightmare.
The ultimate HR nightmare. And my goal tonight is to dissect this thing, not as some dusty, archaic myth, but as a masterclass, a darkly humorous, ruthless survival guide on how regular people, when they're trapped in an impossibly toxic hierarchy, how they engineer their own justice.
Because the setting might be ancient, but the power dynamics, they're completely identical to today.
Exactly.
I mean, the psychology of workplace bullying, the arrogance of unaccountable leadership, none of that has evolved. We literally just swapped out silk robes and palace guards for tailored suits and NDAs.
That is so true. And that actually brings up a crucial point about the environment these people were operating in.
Right, the macroeconomic environment.
Yeah, the macro context. We're in the warring states, period. And for anyone listening who is navigating the constant layoffs and hostile takeovers of today's corporate world, I mean, the warring states era was the ultimate, literal cutthroat market.
Unprecedented instability, states just swallowing each other whole.
Right. It was an era defined by existential dread. So let me ask you this. These rulers of the smaller states, they were basically operating under the constant looming threat of absolute erasure, right?
Exactly. They were, in essence, running failing startups in a market dominated by extremely aggressive monopolies.
Okay, so let me challenge you on the behavior of our main antagonist here, King Kang of Song.
Sure.
He's running one of these doomed small-cap kingdoms. Now, a rational leader in that position would theoretically optimize their resources, build strategic alliances, maybe invest in border defenses.
You would think.
Right. But instead, King Kang essentially takes the company credit card, buys a fleet of sports cars, and throws a never-ending party while his state literally crumbles around him.
Yeah, he embezzles the perks.
Yeah. But I have to wonder, is that really toxic paranoia? Or is it just a brutally pragmatic, nihilistic business decision? Like, if you know the company's going bankrupt on Friday, why not strip the copper wire out of the walls on Thursday?
Well, I mean, that assumes he's operating from a place of cold economic logic.
Which he isn't.
No, he isn't. He's operating from profound psychological panic.
Oh, interesting.
When an authoritarian leader faces absolute external uncertainty, when he realizes he cannot control the massive rival armies amassing on his borders, he frequently overcompensates by demanding absolute, suffocating control internally.
Ah, so he takes it out on the staff.
Exactly. He can't conquer the neighboring state, so he decides to conquer his own employees. He artificially manufactures a microcosm where his power is unquestioned, just to soothe his own terror.
Man, he needs a sandbox where he's still a god.
Precisely. And that requires stripping the autonomy from everyone around him. Their subjugation is literally the only metric he has left for his own relevance.
Which gives us the perfect context for the inciting incident of this whole mess.
Right. The inspection.
Yeah. King Kang is doing his version of walking the factory floor, a royal inspection. He's looking over his human capital, and he spots his employee Han Peng's wife, Mrs. He.
And she is notoriously beautiful.
She is. And in that moment, any pretense of boundaries or executive professionalism just completely vanishes.
Hoof, gone.
He uses his sheer positional leverage to forcibly transfer her into his inner palace.
Yeah.
He makes her his personal captive executive secretary.
Because he erases the line between an employee's professional output and their personal humanity.
Wow.
To him, they are all just inventory.
Just inventory. That's chilling. But here's where the story pivots from a standard tragedy into something much more complex.
Okay, how so?
Well, today, if an executive crossed the line even a fraction this egregious, the standard playbook is to quietly gather evidence, hire an employment lawyer, secure a massive settlement, and disappear.
Right. You update your LinkedIn and you run.
Exactly. But Han Peng is living in an era with no HR department, no labor board, and absolutely no exit strategy. So what does he do? He becomes a massive vocal thorn in the king's side.
He fights back.
He fights back. He sulks. He publicly complains. He actively resists the authority of the guy who literally owns the military.
And you have to understand that refusal to quietly assimilate is a direct threat to the artificial reality King Kang has built.
Because he needs that submission.
Right. Remember, the king needs absolute submission to feel secure. Han Peng's visible grief and anger are an act of rebellion.
And the king's reaction is just incredibly petty.
Oh, incredibly.
He essentially says, oh, you want to be brave, little bro?
Right.
He fabricates a charge, completely removes Han Peng from the board, and banishes him to the frontier to build defensive walls.
Which is basically a death sentence via extreme manual labor.
Right. But I'm trying to understand the king's logic here. If Han Peng is such a threat to his fragile ego, why not just execute him quietly?
That's a good question.
Why go through the theatrical hassle of a trumped-up charge in a labor camp?
Because execution is merely the removal of a problem. Banishing him to build walls. That is the extraction of his dignity.
Oof.
King Kang doesn't just want Han Peng dead, he wants Han Peng broken.
He wants to see him suffer.
Exactly. He wants him actively laboring for the state that stole his life. It's the ultimate flex of ownership. The king is trying to confiscate his pride before he takes his life.
But that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a person actually is.
Completely.
The king assumes that because he holds the title in the army, he somehow holds the souls of his employees.
He really does.
He forces the husband into the freezing mud, traps the wife in the velvet-lined corner office, and he thinks the game is over.
But he vastly underestimated the intelligence of the people he marginalized.
Which brings us to the spycraft.
Oh, this is the best part.
This is where the grassroots resistance actually begins, and it is entirely covert. Mrs. He, who is under the constant surveillance of a tyrannical boss, manages to engineer a secret communication channel to her husband at the black site labor camp. She sends an encrypted email, essentially.
Yeah.
A tiny 12-character poem.
A brilliant use of the limited resources available to her.
But the company mailroom is apparently compromised, right?
Yeah, the king intercepts it.
He intercepts the message. He reads this short poem, but he can't make heads or tails of it. He actually has to call in his chief advisor, basically the ancient equivalent of an IT specialist, just to crack the encryption.
And why is that? Because the cipher isn't mathematical.
Right.
It's emotional. And King Kang, a man entirely devoid of empathy, lacks the software to read it.
That is such a great way to put it. He lacks the software. So the advisor breaks it down for him. The poem reads, and I have this here, rain is relentless, the river is deep, and the sun rises in the heart. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a very moody weather report.
Yeah, it does.
But how does the advisor actually decode this? What is the mechanic of this ancient encryption?
Well, it relies on cultural and linguistic mapping that the king is just too arrogant to notice. The relentless rain is a widely understood metaphor for unending grief and tears.
Makes sense.
The river is deep indicates an uncrossable physical barrier. So the walls of the palace and the distance to the frontier keeping them apart.
Right.
But the final phrase, sunrise in the heart, is the key. The character for will or determination in ancient Chinese often incorporates elements related to the heart and the sun or day.
Oh, wow.
She is making a very specific linguistic vow. She is saying, my mind is made up to die.
Man, it's a suicide note that simultaneously functions as a declaration of undying loyalty to her husband.
And it completely shuts the king out.
Completely.
Even when he intercepts her private communications, he requires a translator just to comprehend her internal world. It's a stark realization of his own irrelevance to her.
But the tragedy accelerates here. Shortly after this message is intercepted, Han Peng actually dies at the border.
Yes.
The exhaustion, the brutal conditions, the toxic workplace literally kills him.
It does.
Now, put yourself in Mrs. He's shoes for a second. You get the news, your husband is dead.
Yeah.
The normal, expected human reaction would be to break down.
Right.
to scream at the king, to throw things,
Yeah.
to have a very messy emotional collapse.
Which is exactly what the king would expect and honestly likely how he would prefer it.
Why is that?
Because an emotional collapse would mean she is finally broken, that he won.
But she doesn't do that.
No.
She gets completely terrifyingly calm.
Yeah.
She becomes highly calculated.
Ice cold.
Ice cold. She agrees to accompany King Kang to a high tower to look at the view, a little executive retreat.
Right.
But here is the detail that absolutely fascinates me. Before they leave, she secretly treats her clothing.
Yeah.
She soaks her dress in a specific chemical solution that degrades the silk fibers, making them as fragile as tofu dregs.
It's incredible.
How does a captive woman, under constant guard, manage to run a covert chemistry lab in her bedroom?
By weaponizing his blind spots. A man like King Kang pays attention to weapons, to guards, to overt displays of power. He does not pay attention to the domestic sphere.
Right, that's beneath him.
Exactly. The women's quarters would have regular access to strong alkaline solutions. Lye, ash mixture stuff used for cleaning silks, preparing dyes, or making cosmetics.
Oy.
To the guards, it's just laundry day.
Wow.
But if you steep silk in a highly concentrated alkaline bath for the right amount of time, it structurally compromises the protein chains in the fiber. The garment maintains its outward shape and appearance, but it loses all its tensile strength.
She engineered a catastrophic structural failure into her own wardrobe.
She did.
It's astonishing. So they're standing at the top of this tower. And without a word, Mrs. King, he throws herself off the edge.
Yeah.
King Kang, utterly panicked at the idea of losing his prized possession, lunges for her. He grabs a handful of her dress to yank her back. And because of the alkaline soak, the fabric just disintegrates in his fists. It tears away instantly. He is left standing there, holding a handful of rotting cloth, while she falls to her death like a butterfly.
It's a powerful image.
And to twist the knife, she leaves a suicide note hidden in her skirt for him to find. It reads, and this is brutal, "You want me to live? I want to die. Bury me with Han Peng."
The precision of that act is just devastating.
I am struggling to find a modern equivalent. It's like a disgruntled systems architect writing a deeply buried, self-destructing line of code that entirely wipes the company's servers the minute the CEO tries to fire them.
It's not just an escape, it's a meticulously designed humiliation.
Yes.
It is the ultimate dismantling of a tyrant's illusion. Think about the mechanics of what she did. By structurally weakening the fabric, she mathematically guaranteed that his physical strength, his brute force, which is literally the only tool he respects, would be useless.
He reached out to exert his power, and his power literally crumbled in his hands.
She proved in front of his entire court that he could not force her to live, he could not force her to love him, and he couldn't even hold on to the hem of her skirt.
Wow.
She stripped him of all authority.
It is a breathtaking middle finger to management.
Truly.
Now, in the real world, death is the end of the employment contract, right? The workers are gone. The company moves on.
Usually.
But King Kang's ego is so fragile, so pathologically bruised by this public defeat that he refuses to let it go. We enter this final bizarre phase of the story where the boss tries to micromanage their corpses.
Because a tyrant cannot abide a narrative he didn't write. Even the grave isn't beyond his perceived jurisdiction.
He reads her final, simple request, "Bury me with Han Peng." And the king refuses.
Of course he does.
He decides to be as petty as humanly possible. He orders his guards to bury them on completely opposite sides of a main paved road.
Yeah.
And then he stands over the dirt and mocks them. He says, "If you two love each other so much, let's see your graves merge across this road."
It's so vindictive.
It is. But why go to the trouble? Why not just throw their bodies in a river and be done with it?
Well, because a secret disposal doesn't serve his ego. He needs a public monument to his own victory.
Ah, right.
By burying them apart in a highly visible location, he is trying to permanently lock them in a state of separation. He is using their graves as a billboard to advertise to his remaining subjects. Look what happens when you defy me. I control you in life, and I control the real estate of your eternity.
That is incredibly dark. But this is where the rules of the universe fundamentally break down in the face of such profound injustice.
The supernatural element.
The cosmic slap in the face arrives literally overnight. The locals wake up the next morning, and 2 massive catalpa trees have sprouted, one from each grave.
Overnight.
Overnight. And they grow with absolute terrifying speed. The trunks bend aggressively toward each other across the road. Beneath the soil, their roots intertwine, completely buckling and destroying the king's paved road.
Wow.
Up above, the branches lock together, forming an impenetrable canopy.
It's a physical architectural negation of the king's final order.
And then, as if to make sure the king really gets the point, a pair of beautiful mandarin ducks flies in.
Oh, perfect. Right. They nest in the intertwined branches right over the ruined road, singing a heartbreaking song all day long. And the locals immediately recognize them as the reincarnated souls of the grassroots couple.
It's beautiful.
I have to admit, there is a very dry, dark comedy to this outcome.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like the ultimate HR complaint filed directly with the cosmos. You worked me to death, so now I'm going to turn into a giant, immovable piece of forestry and force you to watch my eternal public display of affection every time you try to use the highway.
It is deeply satisfying, but it also reveals the core philosophy of these ancient myths.
What's that?
Well, when earthly institutions, the human resources department, the courts, the military, when they are entirely captured and corrupted by a toxic leader, the myth makers deploy the supernatural as the only remaining justice system.
I like that.
But notice how the supernatural manifests. It's not a lightning bolt striking the king dead.
No, it's much slower. It's infrastructure damage.
Exactly. The roots destroying the pavement are a direct mechanical metaphor for the grassroots dismantling the king's infrastructure from the bottom up.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They don't assassinate him. They just render his roads useless. They make his decrees meaningless. Every time the king looks out his window, he is forced to stare at a monument to his own impotence.
They outmaneuvered him, and then they quite literally outgrew him.
They did.
So let's pull all this together. What initially reads like a dusty, tragic romance from antiquity is actually a highly sophisticated blueprint of defiance.
It is.
It's a story about the limits of authoritarian power. King Kang thought his wealth, his title, and his guards gave him a blank check to consume the lives of his employees.
And he discovered the hard way that you can conscript a man's labor, but you cannot requisition his soul.
And to anyone listening right now, maybe you've got a miniature King Kang operating in your own ecosystem. Right. A manager who uses fear to compensate for their own incompetence. Someone who thinks the nameplate on their door makes them untouchable. This ancient text is a reminder that while they might control your immediate schedule, your true agency, your inner world, it can never actually be confiscated unless you hand over the keys.
Exactly.
You always have the capacity to protect your dignity.
I think the most vital lesson here goes beyond just surviving the toxicity, though. It's about the nature of legacy.
Okay, expand on that.
Well, King Kang firmly believed that his absolute control over the present moment dictated reality. He thought his kingdom was the entire world, yet thousands of years later, his state is dust.
Long gone.
His armies are gone, but the quiet, unyielding defiance of his two lowest-ranking employees, their story completely eclipsed his empire.
Their narrative swallowed his entirely.
Exactly. So if we look for the modern equivalent of those intertwined roots cracking the pavement, the things a toxic boss simply cannot control, what is it today?
What do you think it is?
It isn't a magical tree, it's the digital footprint.
Oh, man.
Yes. It's the unerasable, archived legacy of an organization's true culture. A CEO can fire an employee, they can enforce an NDA, they can control the press release today. But they cannot control the anonymous reviews, the whispered network warnings, the permanent digital archives of their own malpractice.
That is so true.
The grassroots workers of today leave a digital root system that quietly grows beneath the surface, permanently defining the leader's legacy long after the company itself has gone bankrupt.
The permanent record. You can pave over the workers, but the internet always remembers the roots.
It really does.
I think I'll drink to that. I'm raising this glass to Han Peng and Mrs. He, two everyday people who knew how to engineer one hell of an exit interview.
Cheers to them.
Thank you for pulling up a stool and joining us for this deep dive. Stay sharp, guard your inner world, and we'll see you next time.